How could anyone be that irresponsible? Isn't that what this president says about mishandling classified documents?
The president spoke to this personally. He spoke to this personally. He believes that classified documents and information should be taken seriously.
That was our own Fox News' Peter Doocy asking White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre the same question that President Biden himself asked after classified materials were found at Mar-a-Lago. It's time now for our Sunday Group. Politico congressional reporter Olivia Beavers, townhall.com political editor Guy Benson, Fox News senior political analyst Juan Williams, and author and legal commentator Horace Cooper. Great to have all of you with us. It's been a quiet week here in Washington. So let's start with the documents. Kimberly Strassel, writing over at the Wall Street Journal, an opinion piece, says this: the power the department, meaning the Justice Department, now has over the 24 election is extraordinary. How long will the probes drag on? Will one investigation finish sooner than the other, giving one candidate an advantage? Will one man be exonerated while the other's indicted? How much information will be leaked in each probe in an attempt at partisan advantage? So, Guy, legal issues aside, there are the political issues as well.
Oh, yeah. And this has been sort of an interesting couple of days because you would think that Team Biden, which discovered these documents, their story before the election, so months ago, would have gotten their act together rather than what we've actually seen, which is a drip, drip, drip of their own making, even though they control the circumstances, which is, I think, political malpractice, certainly. When it comes to the legal side of it, and certainly I think the optics on the politics as well, I keep saying that the Hillary Clinton standard or precedent is the most relevant here. I think of the three people we're talking about, her conduct was most egregious. She was never charged. I can't imagine how they could charge President Trump now, especially in light of what's going on in Biden world. And who knows if this is the end of it. They told us that the search was concluded, and then 5 more documents showed up in a room somewhere at a house on behalf of a president or from a president whose advisors keep saying he takes all this very seriously, but actions and words are differing here.
Well, let's see. Okay, so our buddy Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor, says there should be case closed. He says Biden's already admitted guilt. He's just betting Garland doesn't prosecute him or Trump. He says it appears Biden's not challenging that the documents were classified, that the locations in which he kept them were not authorized, and that he failed to keep track of them. Why have an investigation when all the elements of the offense are already established, Juan?
You know, I find this story baffling in some way. I think the sins are close enough to the casual observer that they would say, well, you know what, one president did it, now another president did it, you know, let's just, it's an equal playing field. In fact, this is the most crazy thing. This is a situation where you have one individual who's forthcoming, one who's hiding. You have one individual who's cooperating, one who's been stonewalling. One instance which is intentionally taking documents for more than a year, refusing to give them up, versus someone who says that some documents were a surprise and accidentally discovered, and the quantity of the documents is hugely different. But again, the sin is close enough that the casual observer is going to say, well, they all do it, so let's just let Trump off the hook. I think the story is about Trump, and I think it's, you know, for Biden, a big loss, because I think people otherwise would be talking about inflation going down. I think people would be talking about the progress the country's been making economically, good jobs report. Instead, people are talking about what to me is a sort of, you know, cable news Trump talking point.
All right, Horace, apples and oranges?
Well, one's happy talk notwithstanding, let me just suggest what this does reveal is that we live in a two-tiered system. If you were a civilian, or if you were even in the service, what you would find with evidence of this kind, you'd already have been frog-marched out. It's not about the difference between the president and the former president. It is the difference between those who are elites and those who are not. Why do we have laws if we're not going to hold people accountable for the violations of them? That's really telling in this case.
Okay, I want to make sure that, Olivia, we get over to Capitol Hill, because we've been talking about the debt ceiling, this big fight that's coming. Do we even know the exact rules or parameters that these holdouts made with Speaker McCarthy in order to get him those votes with respect to this or anything else?
We're still figuring it out, and there's two tiers to that. One is sort of the agreements that they made and they are sharing with the conference, and the others are goals that they say are what they want to aspire to. And the Washington Post had a story out saying that some Republicans, including Congressman Chip Roy, who is one of the 20, wants to do debt prioritization, which means that you can, choose where the money goes to. And Republican experts find that really controversial. Democrats say they're going to use it against them. Whether Kevin McCarthy as Speaker decides to push for that is going to be a whole different thing. But, I think we're all sort of preparing for this to get really messy, whether it's sort of the equivalent of 15 ballots. We don't know, but that's how the Congress kicked off this year.
Well, and you can see the White House and the left is already saying, Guy, that this is going to be on the Republicans. They're playing games with, the full faith and credit of the United States, and that they're the ones who are going to crash this economy and global stability by saying that they may or may not go along with raising the debt ceiling.
Yep, we did all of this about a decade ago. I seem to recall bits and pieces, fragments of it. And here we go again, no question about that. I guess the technical limit is in a few days, but with the extraordinary measures portion of the program, that'll get us, I think, to June. So there's a few months here to play with. I think if Republicans look back at some of the success that they had on this front, roughly a decade ago, a little bit more, it was because they had a unified, somewhat reasonable ask in the end. If they can get there again, they have leverage here to maybe put a dent in this thing to some extent, and the White House will have to negotiate. But they have to be unified, which might be a challenge given what we saw at the beginning of the year, and we'll see if they adjust accordingly.
Okay, so those are some of the top headlines. I got to tell you, I was surprised this week to hear about something that has not been in the headlines, and this is this shortage of baby formula. We've heard about some about the medications too, but I got a message from a friend who said she had a mother with a baby who went to a drugstore and paid $47 for a can of formula, and that the shelves were otherwise bare. This is what USA Today said not long ago. The anguish is palpable and heartbreaking as mothers still are frantically searching for baby formula to feed their babies. Shelves are bare in some places and stores are still rationing sales. Horace, what's going on and why are we not hearing about it?
Well, we clearly have a supply chain management problem. We clearly have shifted in a way when we shut down the economy that we realized we rely overwhelmingly on unreliable sources, particularly China. No one in the White House, even though this problem has started to improve, no one in the White House has addressed the real serious problem. What are we doing so that in general, not just baby formula, which is very important, but what are we doing so that we shift so that there are more domestic supply opportunities? And what we also see in this particular case is a renegade regulatory environment of this administration. And so one person talks or issues a directive and shuts down an industry without regard. This is not too much unlike the snatch of gasoline stoves. One regulatory agency says we want to do it, and then when the White House realizes its impact, they say they don't. The baby formula problem is an exemplar of this.
Okay, and this is a special weekend in that we are remembering Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. And so I want to, as much as we have time, get some reflections on where we are as a country, what we could learn from his legacy, and what we should focus on this weekend. Juan, start with you.
Well, to me, we're going through a period in terms of race in American society where we have lots of arguments over identity politics, politically correct speech, changing teen names and the like. But at the same time, I think you have to realize we're in the midst of huge demographic shifts that are changing the composition, the racial composition of the country. And to that extent, I think we have to celebrate something. I think that America is actually doing much better than you would have anticipated. A lot of our political arguments, I think, have a racial subtext to them. We have to worry about white nationalism and the like emerging. But at the same time, I just think, we should celebrate for a moment. Stop. You can be as skeptical, as negative as you like, but stop for a second and say, isn't it amazing, given the amount of change taking place, that we are still managing to maintain the idea that we have so much in common as Americans?
Horace?
Well, I think Martin Luther King would be extremely excited about what America has accomplished in the name of the vision of equality of Americans. But I think he would also be very disappointed how many people are taking that equality vision as an attack on people. And a new racism is developing in America that needs to be stopped. White people, males, etc., deserve just as much welcoming in American society as Rosa Parks did.
Quick thought, Olivia?
I think one thought that occurred to me is we are in a pretty divisive time, but the teachings of Martin Luther King have continued to persist and be part of our teachings and preachings of how to protest and how to push back on societal change, and his voice still really resonates today.
Guy, close us out.
The founders gave us a miraculous gift in this country with the understanding that we had to always strive for a more perfect union. And it's hard to think of one man who did more in his lifetime in pursuit of that goal than Dr. King.
Thank you all, panel.